Hi, my name is Jyotsna Sreenivasan, and I'm really excited to let you know about my new book, These Americans. This book won a prize from the publisher, which is Minerva Rising Press, and they are a small publisher in Florida, and they are dedicated to publishing works by women. So definitely check them out. The book was published in May of 2021. And the book is 8 short stories and a novella about Indian Americans. It's for adults and older teens. It's not specifically a YA book, but I think it would be fine for older high school students and, of course, college students. The stories all have different characters, but they form a cohesive whole because they're all about Indian Americans. And many of the stories take place in Ohio or the Midwest. So I was born and raised in Ohio. And a lot of the stories are autobiographical. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own life. My parents arrived in Ohio in the early 1960s, and here they are with their new car. My dad is a doctor, and the US government at that time was recruiting doctors from other countries. I guess we weren't graduating enough doctors of our own in this country. And they would have a test that the doctors in other countries would have to pass before being invited to come to the United States. And so they were highly qualified, the doctors that came here. And my dad and the other foreign-born doctors were offered training while they worked in underserved hospitals in the US. So the very first story in the book is called Mirror, and it's based on what my mom has told me about my own birth in Barberton, Ohio, which is a small town suburb of Akron. So when my parents were first here and when my brother and I were born, my parents planned to be in the US for only a short while while my dad finished his training. And so they decided to raise us in an American way, speaking to us only in English. They figured that we'd, get the Indian culture once we went back to India. And they wanted us to fit in the United States. So, but even though my parents were trying to raise us in an American way, I did know that my family was from India. I think I saw myself as a girl from India. I mean, I was really young at that time, but I knew that others saw me as from a different country. I was comfortable with that, I think. I liked wearing Indian clothes when my grandmother sent them to me. Not all the time, but just on special occasions. So we did end up going back to India when I was 5. I started kindergarten there. And all of a sudden, I was seen as the girl from America. So that was a little bit confusing for me. I think it was because I didn't speak the Indian language. And at that time, I had an American accent. So my kindergarten teacher asked me to sing an American song for the class. And I remember singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I was happy to sing it. I was happy to contribute, I guess. And eventually I picked up some Kannada, and I also developed an Indian accent when speaking English. This is a picture of my kindergarten class in India, and I am this little girl over here, if you can see. And you can see there's quite a few kids in this class. I think there's like 40 kids in this class, and I think my teacher had a 1 or 2 adult helpers. I don't think she had to be in the room by herself with 40 5-year-olds. But anyway, she was just a wonderful teacher, very nurturing, very cheerful. I loved her as a teacher. So we did eventually come back to Ohio because when I was 7, because my dad had trouble finding acceptable work in India, and he was welcomed back to the US. Doctors were still needed here. And so now I was all of a sudden the girl from India again. And you can see, this is a picture of my 2nd grade class, and you can see that I'm pretty much the only brown girl in the class. This is in Brimfield, Ohio, and I have so many fond memories of Brimfield. I loved living in Brimfield, but it was a very white town. So the second story in the book is called At Home. It's very autobiographical. It's about a girl who has recently returned to the US from India, and she thinks of herself as an American girl. She doesn't realize that she has an Indian accent, and she's confused about why others see her as a foreigner, and she's desperate to fit in. So to me, The second generation is really important. The stories in this book focus on the second generation, the children of immigrants. So they're actually arranged in the order of the age of the second generation. So in the first story, the new immigrant mom is giving birth to her American daughter. In the second story, the child of immigrants is 7 years old, like that. So it goes on until by the end, by the novella, the immigrant character is elderly and her daughter is middle-aged. And I think the second generation is really important because we are largely a nation of immigrants, yet most of us would identify as American. But when does that becoming American part happen? I think it is largely in the second generation. And I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that for the immigrant generation, a lot of times, even if they've been here for many, many years, if you were to ask them, where are you from? Like if you were to ask my parents, where are you from? I think they would say India. Um, so they are still feeling like they're not from the United States. Whereas if someone asks me, where are you from? I say Ohio. That's where I'm from. That's where I was born. That's where I was raised. And a lot of times people are not happy with that answer because they see me as a foreigner. They see me as from somewhere else. And so in the second generation, a lot of times we're grappling with that conflict, with that, feeling like we feel like we're part of America, but other people don't. How can we fit in? How can we also, like as we grow older, how can we contribute to what we know from our ancestral culture? And so I think this is something that happens has happened throughout the history of America and is as what has made us into the nation that we are. So when I was in elementary school, I really wanted to be considered American. I didn't really know what to make of my Indian heritage. I didn't know the word Indian American at that point. I thought I had to choose between, being the girl from India or the girl from America. And naturally, I was going to choose being the girl from America. I was obsessed at that time with the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House books and the TV show. And my mom made me this pioneer girl dress that you can see in the picture. And I wrote a skit about two pioneer girls, and I made my best friend act in this skit with me. We're performing on her back porch here. And we performed it for Mother's Day, and we invited all the moms in the neighborhood to come and see us. And I don't remember how many people actually showed up, but my mom obviously showed up because she took the picture. And I think at that time, at that time, I didn't think there was anything odd about an Indian American girl pretending that she was a pioneer girl, and I guess a white pioneer girl. I think I just desperately wanted that American heritage that I felt like I was lacking. So eventually I did begin to accept my Indian heritage. I think a turning point for me was having an Indian teacher for some of my sixth grade classes and seeing that the other kids respected her and just treated her just like any other teacher, and that she was an accepted and respected part of the school. So I think that I didn't realize it until recently, but I think unconsciously it made me accept my heritage and realize that I could be seen as Indian and still be part of the larger school culture. And so like by seventh grade, I was comfortable wearing Indian clothes to school sometimes. This is my seventh grade school picture, and I wore this pretty Indian tunic, and I've got these, big gold Indian earrings here. So okay, I know this is not a good picture of me, but I put this picture in for the sweater because one of the stories is called The Sweater, and it's about a young woman who finds connection with her mother by knitting a sweater. And the story is based on this actual sweater that I really did knit. Now, in the story, the young woman is in college and she's knitting the sweater instead of studying. I actually knit the sweater much later in my life. And there are several stories that are not autobiographical, or I mean, not very autobiographical. There's probably some parts that come from my life, but mostly they're not autobiographical. So Revolution is about a teenage boy who is part Indian, and he's struggling to deal with his parents' divorce. Mrs. Raghavendra's Daughter is about an Indian immigrant who has trouble accepting her daughter's lesbian relationship. And Hawk, the novella, is about an immigrant woman physician from India. And, I did not grow up. My mother is not a physician. It's my dad that's the physician. But I was very fascinated by the fact that a lot of being a doctor in India is an acceptable profession for a woman in India. But when these women came to the US, it was not seen as acceptable. These women faced some discrimination, gender discrimination, at that time. And I wanted to explore those issues through this novella. I do have some resources for readers of these Americans on my website, secondgenstories.com. I have discussion questions. So if you want to, host a book club or a book reading, if you want, you can look at the discussion questions. I also, if you're interested in the category of second generation literature, I have reviews and lists of lots of other books by second generation authors. So definitely check that out. I do have a resource for teachers. It's a free lesson plan about immigration, the American dream, and the second generation. It's for middle school and high school, and it's a 5-week lesson plan. It's a free download from my website. Okay, so that's the end of the slideshow. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I wanted to read a little bit from a couple of the stories, just so that you get a sense of what they sound like. You can also read some excerpts, the first page of each story, on my website, secondgenstories.com. And so this is from Mirror, which is the very first story in the book. And it's, again, about a new immigrant mom giving birth. And she's actually in the hospital right now giving birth. And so, of course, if this immigrant woman were reading the story she would have a nice Indian accent, and I have a Midwestern accent. So you'll just have to go with it. Mirror. I'm lying on this hard hospital delivery bed with only a small thin robe over my body. My legs, even my knees, are all uncovered, and my bare feet are in these stirrups. It's indecent how you must be to give birth. In India, do they cover the women more? I don't know, but here in America, no one cares. They go about in shorts and swimming suits anyway. My hands and arms are cold. My stomach is a big mountain. Every so often it gets hard and I know I'm having a contraction. It doesn't hurt at all. They gave me a shot in my back. It is called an epidural. I'm glad. I was afraid I would scream and embarrass myself. The American nurse comes in. She's thin and tall. She smiles. I have gotten used to these Americans smiling all the time. When I first came here in April of 1965, almost 2 years ago, I thought, why are they always laughing at me? At first I thought, it's my sari and my kumkum. They have never seen someone wearing a sari and kumkum before. Then, after I took off the kumkum and began wearing skirts and shaving my legs and everything, still they laughed. I thought, what's wrong with me that they should be showing their teeth every time I appear? Finally, I asked my friend Betty Pryor. She's my closest friend in America. She's a single lady and she owns a house and we stay in the apartment in the basement. Imagine, a single lady owning her own house and even renting it to strangers? Betty told me, Prema, they're not laughing at you. They're just being friendly. You must also smile when you meet someone. Then she said, you have a beautiful smile. No one ever told me I was beautiful before. The next morning, after I brushed my teeth, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. A frowning brown lady was there staring at me. I opened my lips and stretched them into a smile. The lady in the mirror looked funny and I began laughing, and there was a pretty lady laughing back at me. Then I felt ashamed of myself and left the bathroom. Who did I think I was? A princess or something? And so that's a couple of pages from the very first story. And I'll read a little bit from the third story, which is called Revolution, just to give you a sense of what a story sounds like that's not particularly autobiographical, and it's also in the third person as opposed to the first person. And this is called Revolution. It's about the teenage boy who is part Indian. Neil was 13, and his sister, Anita, was 10 when their parents split up. On a chilly day in March, his mother picked him up after his astronomy club meeting and told him. As he sat in the front seat listening to her, Neil tried to keep his mind on the fact that he, his mother, the car, and the freeway were, at that moment, spinning through space at 30 kilometers per second on their journey around the sun. In the months before the divorce was final, when Dad had moved out and was living on the other side of Newark in an unfurnished efficiency apartment, which contained almost nothing but a beanbag chair and empty Chinese food takeout boxes, Neil asked his parents many times why they were getting divorced. His father, T. Gopalakrishnan, would rub his small pot belly slowly and say, in his thick Indian accent, rolling his R's and enunciating each consonant strongly, "Your mother has decided she does not want to be married to me anymore." His mother, Linda, would toss her long brown hair over her shoulder and say, "Your father isn't interested in working on our marriage." Neil tried to point out to each parent that, apparently, things could work out if they simply admitted to each other that they wanted to stay married. They'd shake their heads and look at him searchingly. "No, Neil," they'd say, "it won't work out. I'm sorry." He was baffled by the ways of adults. One day, while he and Anita were sitting on the floor of the basement rec room playing Monopoly, he asked, "How can two people get a divorce without ever having a fight?" Anita moved her piece, the horse, past go and counted $200 onto her pile of money. "They fought all the time." "When?" "They fought every day. Didn't you hear them?" Neil thought about this. He remembered a chilliness in the air during dinners sometimes. He remembered his parents closing their bedroom door and having muffled conversations. He remembered wanting to retreat to his room more often than usual. What did they fight about? Mom said Dad was spoiled and expected to be treated like a prince. She said she wasn't a subservient Indian wife. Dad said he only wanted a hot meal and a clean house when he came home and that Mom was the spoiled one. He said she wanted to be waited on hand and foot. Mom said they needed marriage counseling, and Dad said he'd never set foot in a counselor's office. He said there was nothing wrong with him. It's your turn, Neil. How did you hear all that? My room is next to theirs. I could hear everything. Neil was astonished that Anita could remember all this. He didn't see how these minor misunderstandings could lead to something as momentous as ripping apart the only life he'd ever known. He thought his parents were hiding something from him. Okay, and so that's a couple pages from the third story. And I hope you'll check out my book, These Americans, and check out my website, secondgenstories.com. It's been great connecting with you. Bye-bye.